I am sure that it's not the first time that we are hearing of this. These are things that we handled before, and therefore we are not going to spend a lot of time tackling it and going through it. I would wish to take the shortest time possible. Now, inflation. Give you powers. Will disturb us. So let me mute all of you. Good. Muted. As I was saying, we look at the inflation and deflation. We can also call that fluctuation in the value of money. And inflation can be defined as too much money or too much currency in circulation. Too much currency in circulation. It can also be said to be the issuance of too much currency. Right? Issuance of too much currency. You can also call it a state in which the value of money is falling. Can also be defined as the state in which the value of money is falling. Of course, all these definitions seek to establish a relationship between the supply of money and the general price level. They seek to establish the relationship between the supply of money and general price level. I am trying to figure out the best of the definition of inflation, but bearing in mind that we have different schools of thought in economics, then you expect there to be different views. Yeah, you expect there to be different views on inflation, and therefore defining the word inflation or giving definition, a meaning to that word. Now, generally, it is a general increase in price level. You can call it a rise in general price level. It is not an increase in price of just one commodity. So that if the bread today is costing 50 and then next week you hear it is 100, then you start telling me that there is inflation, right? By considering just one item, one food item. And therefore I want to demystify this word, because I know it is used in very many senses, very different ways, and different people use it to mean different things. And therefore, that is why that word, it is very specific. Rise in general price level, right? So it is the price level in general, considering the prices of different commodities and the services in the market, and then deciding, is there an increase in the price levels? Is there an increase in price levels? I therefore want to hope that that is clear. You can also look at it in terms of the upward trend in general price level. You know, are the prices of commodities in general decreasing or increasing? If they are increasing, then we have what we call inflation. If they are decreasing, then we have what we call deflation. We have what we call deflation. Pigu, who is one of the economists, approaches this one probably differently. And remember, we've covered his approach to money and prices and interest before. And his approach establishes the relationship between money, income, and the output. And we called it an output and income approach. And according to Pigu, or Professor Pigu, inflation is taking place when money income is expanding relatively to the output of work by productive agents for which it is the payment, right? And therefore, inflation exists when money income expanding more than in the properties to income earning activities. Now, the approach is quite simple. When a supply of money increases in relation to the demand, and such accumulation shall be utilized for productive purposes and at lower rate. This, in turn, according to Pigu, increases the production. Now, the increase in money supply, on the other hand, will increase the money income of the people, and this may push up the demand for goods and services for consumption, right? And in this case, the production will continue to increase so that we can match the demand that is caused by the increase in income that people have. Yeah. And that is Pigu. J.M. Keynes linked up the concept of inflation with the phenomenon of full employment, right? And according to him, an inflationary rise in price level is not possible before that point of full employment. And as soon as we reach that point, any increase in money supply in the economy will push up the price level. But until that point is reached, the point of full employment of all the resources, we're not just talking about the human resources, but all the resources, all the factors of production. If that point is reached, then any increase in money supply is will push up the price level. Yeah, and therefore, according to J.M. Keynes, the only true inflation is after a point of full employment is reached. Yeah, and therefore it is good to be able to look at all those and look at the different views that people have, or that the scholars, established scholars have when it comes to these issues. We'll go to different types of inflation, or inflation and its different forms. We can also say forms of inflation or kinds of inflation. Form or kinds of inflation. Who are still getting into the class. So we're looking at the forms or kind of inflation, forms and kind or kinds of inflation. And of course, it can be categorized on a different basis. It can be categorized on different basis. And one is we can categorize it on the basis of the rate, on the basis of the rate of inflation. You can categorize and classify inflation on the basis of the rate itself. And when you categorize it on the basis of the rate, we say that there may be three types. There may be three types. One is what we call creeping inflation. The other one is what we call galloping inflation. And the third one is what we call hyperinflation. Yes, Ndiku. Ndiku, can you use public chat there? I'll be able to see it. I'll be able to see the public chat instead of raising your hand. Or you don't know how to use this thing, eh? You are experimenting. If you have anything, kindly put it there. I'll be able to see it on the public chat, right? If anything is not clear, kindly put it there. But I'm also putting some notes there. Thank you, Dennis. I'm also putting some notes there for you in short form so that you're also able to follow up. So we are saying that inflation can be classified in different ways. It can be classified in different ways. And one of the bases of classifying and categorizing inflation is on the basis of the rate itself, right? The rate of inflation itself. And if we classify it according to the base, then we have said that we have three types. One is what we call creeping inflation. Two is what we call galloping inflation. And three is what we call hyperinflation. Good. Number two, we can also classify it on the basis of the degree of control. To what extent are we able to control that inflation? To what extent are we able to control the inflation? Now, in this case, we have two. Sorry. Let me post this in the group to everyone. In this case, we have two types. One, we have open inflation, and then we have suppressed inflation. We have open inflation, and number two, we have suppressed inflation. Number three, we can also classify this according to the causes or what causes that inflation. We can classify it according to the sources, according to the causes. Causal. And when we classify it according to the sources, then we will have, according to the causes, then we'll have one, credit inflation. Number two, we have currency inflation. Number three, we have budgetary inflation. Number four, we have demand pull inflation. And number five, we have cost push inflation. Cost push inflation. Of course, cognizant of the fact that many books may classify them differently. Eh? So this is the way I classify them. And again, we can also categorize them on the basis of employment. Can classify them on the basis of employment, in which case we'll have what we call we'll have two types. We have two types. One is semi-inflation, and two is full inflation. Semi-inflation, and two is full inflation. Now we would be looking at each and every one of these to see what they entail, and before we are able to look at other issues. So we start with the basis of rate. And the basis of rate, we classify them into three. And one of them was what we call creeping. And the creeping can also be called mild inflation. Creeping can also be called mild inflation. And creeping inflation occurs in a situation where rise in price level is at a very slow rate over a period of time. It occurs in a situation where the rise in price level is at a very slow rate over a period of time. Sometimes this is very difficult to quantify, but basically, many economists agree that any inflation up to a rate of 3% per annum, any inflation up to a rate of 3% per annum can be termed as creeping inflation. I hope that is clear. Number two, we talked about galloping. Galloping, and this galloping occurs when we allow the mild or the creeping inflation to continue for too long before we arrest it, right? And the galloping inflation is a situation where price rise at a faster rate. Talk about 8 to 10%, 8 to 10% per annum. And it's also good to say here, to note here that this acts as a sign or as a warning. It's a warning signal. And if we are here, then the government should take immediate steps to curb the inflationary pressure. Otherwise, it may have what we call devastating effects on the economy. This is because when it reaches this level, it reduces the capacity of the people to save and to invest, right? And therefore, most of the long-term projects cannot be carried out. And at this point, if it is left, we have said that it will have what? Devastating effects on the economy. It will have what we call devastating effect on the economy. Number three is what we called hyper. Hyper can also be called jumping inflation. We can also call it jumping inflation. And basically, this is the last stage of inflation. It is a kind of inflation in which price line goes up very rapidly within a short period of time, right? And therefore, we do not expect a limit of price rise in this type of inflation. We don't expect a limit. Normally, it is beyond the control. It is beyond the control, and the monetary authorities find it beyond their resources to put any check on it. They find it beyond their resources to put any check on it. And I think the first time it occurred was in the First World War. Yeah, First World War in Germany. That is when the price levels were galloping. Means you can also call it galloping inflation. Depends with the author of the book that you read. Sometimes they call it galloping inflation. Others hyper, others jumping. Basically, meaning is inflation without recovery, because no efforts of the government can help recover the economy. It is destructive. It is very destructive, and normally every property will lose its value. Yeah, and therefore that means that it should be avoided by all people at all costs. It should be avoided by all people at all cost. Avoid it at all cost. Avoid it at all cost. Could we continue and look at the one on the basis of the degree of control? The basis of degree of control. And we have said that we can classify the inflation in this basis two different types. One is the open inflation and the other one is suppressed. Now, open inflation occurs when price continue to rise without any controls and checks. The price continues to rise without any controls and check. And it's can also be called a Milton-Friedman inflation, because it follows what Milton Friedman said, that inflationary process in which prices are permitted to rise without being suppressed by government, price control, or similar techniques. And therefore, the government here does nothing, right? It is an open inflation. The prices are allowed to do what? To rise. The prices are allowed to rise. We also have what we call suppressed inflation. And under this type of inflation, price rise is put under control for the time being by the government through its various anti-inflationary techniques. This is where now the government comes in to try and control the inflation using the various tools that they have, both monetary and fiscal policies, right? And as long as they are doing that, then we can call it suppressed. We can call it suppressed inflation. And number three, we classified according to the basis of causes. According to the basis of causes. And here we had what we call credit. And this arises from the banking sectors. The fact that they create credit, right, on the basis of the customers give them. Therefore, credit inflation originates due to the expansion of credit money by the banks, which further increases the supply of money without any corresponding increase in production. So out of the credit creation process by the bank, there can be inflation because they are increasing money by giving out loans, right? Without a corresponding increase in production of goods and services. And therefore, you'll find that at the end of the day, there can be more money in the economy than the goods or the products that are there. Such a one is called credit inflation. We also have what we call currency inflation. Currency inflation. And this is inflation that is caused by excessive flow of money in circulation, right? And this arises when the government issues more currency without any legitimate demand for currency to purchase goods and services. Therefore, this one again is created by the government. Remember, the government, of course, through CBK is the issue of currencies or currency. And whenever they do that, there is likely to be inflation if there is no corresponding increase in production. And therefore, the government, before the issuance of any new notes, they are supposed to be very careful to have put measures in place to ensure that there shall be increase in production. And therefore, the inflation that comes out of that process of issuance of new currency or printing of new money and releasing it in the market would be called currency inflation. We also have what we call budgetary inflation. Budgetary inflation, and this will happen whenever we are reading the state budget. No, the government generally show more expenditure than revenue, right? And the gap between expenditure and revenue is left uncovered, right? In this way, the government adapts the technique of deficit financing, which increases the money supply and consequently, price will rise. Prices will rise. Someone cannot hear anything. Can the rest of you confirm whether you're hearing anything? Meanwhile, I take a break of 1 minute, but confirm whether you're hearing because George Gekunda is not hearing anything. What is happening? The first option that will pop George Kikunda. Data. You will give press the press the button on your bottom left. What does that mean? I had to press the option over your data. Not so clear. Yes, it is clear. You can refresh the login at your George. Kindly do that. Click your headphone hapo chini. Oh, I'm hearing you from my side. First option which will pop. GG, your guide. Sawa. George, it can be sorted by your fellow colleagues, right? But ensure that my voice is clear. Ensure that you're able to hear. But just in case you may have problems, we still put this in. By the way, I hope you are able to access those recordings. We usually put them in. You started hearing now, Reverend. These gadgets are new to you. They are new to you. Wanna George? It's all right. It's all right. I was saying that you should be able to access this from the YouTube channel of Zitec University. We usually post them there, though it usually take time, probably 1 or 2 days later. But you should be able to find it there, and especially when we talk about Zoom. For Zoom, we must put them there. And this Zoom is not private. It's not my own account. It belongs to Zitec. Therefore, I've had you people complain that I'm using Zoom, which is private. I don't get it. It's still a part of what you have. Yeah, still a part of what you have. Therefore, there should be no issue. There should be no issue here. We have looked at the budgetary, right? Number 4 was on demand and demand pool or demand and pool inflation. And this occur when demand of goods and services in the economy is more than their supply, right? The cases where you go to the supermarket and you want to buy things and they are not there. Such a case. The effective demand, of course, increase due to increased money, income, or various factors of production consequent upon the increase in investment. Because if money income increases and everybody has some few coins in their pocket, then the next thing is you want to buy what you don't have. And if all of us have that same notion, then it means that our demand for certain products will be higher than even their supply. Might be higher than their supply. Might be higher than their supply. Sharon, you are losing focus. You have said budgetary comes from the budget that the government prepares, right? That's what you have said. From the budget that the government prepares. And in generally, we say that expenditures must always be more than the revenue, right? Expenditure of the government must be more than the revenue, and therefore that creates what we call deficit financing. And deficit financing means what? We'll have to look for money, whether it is from outside or from within. And therefore you find that increases money supply, and consequently raises the prices of commodities or causes inflation. We look at the cost push inflation, and this is caused by the increase in cost of production without any corresponding increase in the productivity. You need your minute, 1 minute. I answer this call. Sorry for that. We continue. We continue. We continue. Where were we? We were on cost push, and we have said that the cost push inflation is caused by increase in the cost of production without any corresponding increase in the productivity, right? And it is generally caused by two things. One, increase in wages, and two, increase in profit margin. Increase in wages and the increase in profit margin. Now, wage push, because now the increase in wages will cause what we may call wage push, which is a part of cost push. And therefore, the increase in wages causes wage push inflation. And wage push, let me put this here so that you're also able to follow. Everyone. Wage push, wage push inflation. Wage push inflation is caused by increase in wages, as we have said. It's good to note here that some monopolistic trade union exercise pressure tactics to increase the wages of workers. The work of the likes of Atuoli, making noise every now and then, and then, so the government can increase the salaries and the wages for the workers. And of course, this will affect the cost of production. Yeah? And this pressure for increase in wages will push up the cost of production and consequently the prices of commodities and services, because every employer will, the salaries that are paid forms a part of the cost of commodities. And therefore, if the trade unions push for more pay and for increase in salaries and wages, that will result into higher cost of production. When we have higher cost of production, then there will also be what we call inflation or wage push inflation. Now, the second one, the one that we're talking about, the profit margin, can also be called profit push inflation. Profit push inflation. So put that one there. Those people who are joining us. Profit push inflation, can also call it profit push inflation, and an attempt on the part of the entrepreneur or the entrepreneurs and businessmen to increase their profit margin may also cause profit push inflation. But this is minor as considered together with the wage push. Wage push appears to be the major cause of cost push inflation. Now, it's also important for us to note here that the increase in, again, raw materials cost, increase in factors of production, not just wages, the increase in other factors of production can also cause what we call cost push inflation. And that is one of the reasons why companies find it difficult, because instead of pushing the prices of commodities so high, they choose to exit. Unfortunately, they exit the market. And I know you are aware of many companies, many companies that have exited this market, be it Eveready, be it AC Johnson, yeah, be it Norfolk Hotels, chain of hotels. And now I hear even the Intercontinental Hotel is also moving out. Why? Because of the cost of production. And the funny thing with cost of production is if they don't exit, they only have one option. And the option is to push the prices of their services higher, right? And when they push those prices of their services higher, then it means that their competitors will outperform them. because there is no way you go to pay for a room and pay 100K when others are charging 50,000, right? And therefore, eventually they would still move out of. They will still have no business, and therefore, the most immediate result is for them to pull out of this market. That is what is happening. I want to hope that we can have a turnaround of that. I hope we can have a turnaround of that. It will go a long way in ensuring that we attract enough investments. We attract enough investments in Kenya. Kiguru, I am here. Sijapotea, niko hapa. Kindly check the network on your side. Kindly check the network on your side. Good. The other thing, or the other basis, is on the basis of employment. Basis of employment, and on the basis of employment, we classified inflation into two. And one is what we call semi-inflation, and two is full inflation. Semi-inflation, according to Keynes, occurs when price level rises partly due to increase in the cost of production and partly due to increase in supply of money before we reach that point of full employment, right? It occurs as a result of two pushes. One is the cost of production, and the other one is money supply. And we have not yet reached that point of full employment. Full inflation prevails generally in a situation where the economy has achieved the level of full employment, right? Any increase in money beyond full employment level will result in rise of prices, since there is no increase in production, because all the factors of production are fully employed. You cannot simply produce anymore because all the factors are engaged, right? And therefore, when that happens, then we'll have what we call full inflation. We'll have what we call full inflation. Having said that, it's important that we look at the causes and effects of inflation, causes and effects of inflation. And inflation, again, just to repeat this, is a situation in which general price level increases or is on upward trend. And in such a situation, prices of commodities and services will increase. And we cannot say that generally it is regarded that every increase in money supply will tend to increase the price level. But is it so? Is it so that anytime we increase money supply, we will increase the price level? Of course, it is not so. According to Pigu and Keynes, the prices of commodities and services do not change until there is a state of full employment in the economy, with every increase in money supply. Because in normal situation, when you increase money supply, then it should automatically increase production, right? But as long as there are unutilized factors of production, which means that we are not in a state of full employment, then the prices are not supposed to rise automatically. Now, what are the causes? What are the causes? The general price theory, as we saw, states that the price rise may occur due to either of the following in either of the following situation. It may occur in either of the following situation, and one is when aggregate demand increases. When aggregate demand increases, and number two is when the aggregate supply falls. When aggregate demand increases, or when the aggregate supply falls. If there is an increase in demand without any corresponding increase in supply, then we'll have inflation. If there is a decrease in supply, without any fall in demand, or without any decrease in demand, then the price would go up. Therefore, the price rise or inflation is caused by two sets of causes. It is caused by two sets of causes. One, there are those causes which induce an increase in demand, and there are those causes which produce a fall in supply due to increased cost. Said because of this, any inflation will be caused by two sets of causes, or two types of causes. No. Cause number one is increase, is causes which there are various causes that will induce an increase in demand. And number two, we have said there are those causes which will produce a fall in supply, right? Inflation caused by the inducement of increase in demand will of course be called demand pull inflation, while the other one that is caused by a fall in supply is a cost push inflation. So what causes demand pull inflation? What are the causes of demand pull inflation? One, we have what we call money supply. We have money supply, and the increase in, let me put this somewhere here. You also able to follow. So we are looking at the factors that are responsible for an increase in demand, thereby causing what? Demand pull inflation, or causes of demand pull inflation. And we have said that one of the causes of demand pull inflation is money supply. And money supply, increase in money supply is the major factor that induces demand for goods and services. And we have talked about it before. If you increase money supply, yeah, people will want to spend it in purchasing goods and services. Yeah, you increase it, so it will also increase what we call bank deposits, which are a basis of expansion of credit by the banks, right? You increase money supply, the banks will want to lend more, right? And therefore, as a result, what happens is that there will be too much money in the market chasing after very few goods, thereby causing that inflation. Number two is what we call disposable income. Disposable income. And disposable income refers to the income payment to various production factors after personal taxes have been paid. Yeah, after you pay the taxes, what remains is what we can call disposable income. And an increase in disposable income results in an increase in the absolute amount of consumption that you can have as an individual, or that we can have as an economy. And when that goes up, then we are likely to spend more. And when you spend more without any corresponding increase in production, you expect the prices of commodities to go up, right? The other one is raising the velocity of money. If we raise the velocity of money, and if the velocity of money persistently goes up, and especially what happens in the boom period, it will reach a point when people will stop preferring liquid money, and their consumption function dominates the saving attitude, right? You no longer want to hold this money because you already have plenty of it. It is circulating at a higher rate, right? And therefore, what dominates you or what dominates is the consumption function. And as you consume more, you'll bring an increase in the velocity or the number of times that money changes hand, right? And therefore spur what we call prices to rise. The other cause of demand for inflation is what we call deficit financing. And deficit financing is a technique through which the government covers the budgetary gap. Remember when we say that the expenditures are always more than the revenues? The difference there is gotten from deficit financing. And that means that the government will spend more than what it expects to collect, right? And that deficit is met by issuing more currency in the market or by borrowing from foreign governments and international agencies. And therefore, this will result in more money in the market and will increase the price level because the disposable income of countrymen will have increased. The disposable income of countrymen will have increased. The other one is what we may call increase in population. The other factor may be increase in population. And if the population of a country rises rapidly, it will pressure the demand of goods and services. People will want more goods and services. And if money supply does not increase with this, the velocity of money will increase, right? The number of times that money circulates will increase, and therefore that will trigger the prices of commodities to go higher, to trigger the prices of commodities to go higher. The other one that we've talked about here is a cost push. Cost push, the one that is caused when there is a fall in supply. When there is a fall in supply. And when the cost of production increases, the supply curve will go downward, provided there is no increase in demand at the prevailing prices. Thus, increase in cost of production decreases the supply, resulting in upward trending price level. Increase in production will consequently cause a decrease in supply because if products are becoming too expensive for you to make, then most of the manufacturers will make less of those products because they don't want to invest all their money making few products. And therefore, when they do that, it may result in decrease in supply. There'll be fewer products to be supplied. And when that happens, then it is likely to cause prices to go higher. What are the factors that are responsible for this cost push in inflation? What factors are responsible for this cost push in inflation? One is what we call higher wage rates, and we have seen this when we talked about strong and monopolistic trade unions or strong trade unions. Many of the times they will demand higher pays, right? Like the way it is happening now. Nurses want to down their tools by Monday, right? Because they are demanding for higher wages, right? Now, if that happens, then that cost of production will be loaded on the product. If it happens in an economy, then the cost will be loaded on the cost of the items, and therefore you expect that the cost of the items will increase, and therefore this may cause general increase in price level. The other factor is higher profit margin. We have also looked at the issue of entrepreneurs here. If they want to make more money and they increase the prices, again it will result to cost push inflation. We also have what we call fall in supply of basic inputs, a fall in supply of basic inputs. And whenever basic and the strategic raw materials and other input like basic inputs, cement, right? the basic input. Steel and iron in the construction industry, if they go in a short supply, the price will tend to move upward, right? And therefore, if some of these commodities, if the breads and the unga and all these food items are not in good supply, what do you expect? Expect the prices to start rising. The other cause is what we call higher taxes. Higher taxes. And in a bid to bridging the gap, the deficit that is always there in the government budget, the government can resort to raising taxes. And if they raise tax, that means that it will leave less money at the disposal of the income earners, right? At the same time, if this tax is borne by manufacturers, then they will load it up in the cost of goods. For example, if there is an increase in electricity, what happens? The manufacturers will count it as a cost, and if they count it as a cost, it means that it will increase the prices of the commodities, and therefore there is likely to be an upward trend in price changes. Right? Very, very important. The other one is also we can also have natural factors. We can also have natural factors affecting us. And this may be things like insufficient or excessive rainfall. We may have natural calamities like earthquakes, floods, drought conditions, corona being one of them, right? And all these will exert or will increase inflationary pressure because people are at home, no production, no much production is taking place. Yet people still want these goods and these items. And therefore, it can result to too many people and too much money looking and chasing after very few goods, and therefore the prices are likely to go up. The prices are likely to go up. The other one is also what you call government policies. Government policies. And here we can say that various policies of the government also have causes a rise in general price level in the country. For example, the wage policy fixing the wages of workers working in specified industry. If the government does raise, or if the government raises the wages of nurses, for example, or the wages of teachers, for example, you expect that again will result into inflation. It will result into inflation. There's a question on the effect. There's a question on the effects of inflation. I think this one will be discussed by us today. It should be discussed by us today. Let me try and put it somewhere. Let me put it somewhere here. Register forum. Group forum. The topic. Effects of inflation. Effects of inflation. Subject to discussion. Subject to discussion. there are quite many. What are the measures that are used to control inflation? What measures are used to control inflation? And I don't want to dwell so much on this. I don't want to dwell so much on this because I know we have tackled both, actually various methods that are used to tackle inflation. We've tackled most of them, and therefore I don't want to dwell so much there. But mainly, the measures that are used to check inflation, we have what we call monetary measures or monetary policy measures, and we also have fiscal policy measures, right? Use of bank rate, use of open market operation. Not yet. I'm not through, Patrick. You're putting the cart before the horse. I'm not yet through with that. So we see, I'm just mentioning. It is important for me to mention because how do we check inflation? How do we ensure that there is no or reduce the inflation? And one, I said that we can use both. We can use monetary tools, right? And we can also use physical policy tools. For monetary policy tools, I said we have what we call bank rate. We may have what we call open market operation or OMO. We may have what we call reserve requirements. We have what we call consumer credit control, right? And physical, we may have what we call public expenditure, tax, borrowing, debt management, etc. Those are some of the things that must be done, or some of the tools that the government must use to ensure that they control inflation. I'm saying I will not dwell on them because we have encountered them before, not once, not twice, several times. Good. Having said that, I think it is important for us to just mention a few things about deflation. Deflation is the opposite of, inflation. We look at deflation. We look at the deflation. This one, we have said it is the opposite of, inflation. And it is a state where the money value is rising, when the money value is rising, or the price level is falling. That is what we call deflation. It is what we call deflation. Let me put it here, but you're able to again follow. It is what we call deflation. Now, according to one of the economists called Crother, deflation is a state of economy where the value of money is rising. But of course, it's also good to note here that every fall in prices cannot be called deflation. Every fall in prices cannot be called deflation. Sometimes the fall in prices is caused by reasons other than the contraction in money supply, right? Sometimes there are so many other factors that can cause a contraction in money supply rather than deflation. So what are the causes of deflation? Causes of deflation are the opposite of the causes of inflation. They are the opposite of the causes of inflation. And here, the causes of deflation would be one, when the aggregate demand of goods and services falls. Remember, for the inflation, we talked about rising, right? And therefore, here, the causes of deflation will be when the aggregate demand for goods and services fall, or when the supply of goods and services, rise. I need a minute to receive a call, kindly. Sorry for that. And therefore, we are saying that this is the opposite. It is the opposite of inflation. And therefore, you expect that even the causes of deflation will be the opposite of the causes of inflation, right? And for example, one, there may be increase in production, where we see a rapid increase in production, which surpasses demand, will cause a fall in general price level. It will cause a fall in general price level. And therefore, again, I don't want to dwell so much on it. I don't want to dwell so much on it. You should be able to argue both ways. You should be able to argue both ways. Is inflation unjust? Is inflation unjust? Is it unjust? Do we need inflation? I think that is upon you to look at again. Upon you to look at. There are those of the school of thought that inflation is evil, and there are those of the school of thought that inflation is good. Right? Too much money. Let everybody have money, right? And we'll know where the goods will come from. And those now will say, let the goods be there. Limit the amount of money people have. And the economy will be good, right? And therefore, it is important for us to be able to argue out both ways, why we may need inflation, and why we may not need inflation, right? Now, if there is no other thing, I wish to put a stop there for my presentation. We go to the group discussion. It is all already there, but I'm going to add another question there on the effects of deflation. What do you think are the effects of deflation? So we are discussing effects of inflation and effects of deflation, right? Good. The other thing that I wish to mention now that we are in class, the other thing that I wish to mention is that there will be a makeup. I'll be posting it today. If I have not already posted it, I think it is not posted. Is it? Not sure. If it is not posted, I'll be posting it today, right? And that is for those people who missed cut in one way or another, right? It will have a restriction. It will be a timed one. It will be a timed one, but I'll give you time to tackle it in between now and maybe next week, right? But once you click on it, you will have probably 1 hour to complete it. So it is a timed quiz, right? So let us note that. We are coming to the end of the semester, right? So we only have next week to meet. So next week we still meet, because I think our exams should be starting on 24th, if I'm not wrong. We meet next week. Then the other week, when the diploma exams will be starting, then we'll be free to do our revision. I hope that is clear. I hope that is clear. Good. We go to the discussion.